So let me. What happened to this? And we're recording. So we're here with Adam Rifkin, and and he's a writer, director, and we're here with the students at the university. And Adam, I've asked the students to IMDb you, and so that they, if they're not already familiar with you, that they would be, and certainly anyone else can. But could you give us a little bit of background of how you came to reside in LA, and a bit about your career path from Midwest to West?
Sure. I'm from Chicago. From as early an age as I can remember, I loved movies. I loved everything about them, and I knew that I wanted to, in some way or another, be a part of making them. I didn't understand when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. I didn't understand what a director was or what a producer was. But I just knew that movies got made, and I wanted to get in on that. My first love was monster movies, and then that eventually evolved into a love of all kinds of movies. But from the time I was about 7, I started making movies with my father's Super 8 movie camera, and that's all I did obsessively my entire youth with my friends, and always expecting, that as soon as I was old enough, I would move out to Hollywood and I would learn how to make real movies. And when I got out to Hollywood and I saw how real movies were made, I then realized that I had been teaching myself the principles of filmmaking without even realizing it at all. I mean, when I made my first film, I did in-camera editing, where at that time, it was shot on a Super 8 film camera. So a friend of mine played both parts in a movie that we made. So I would film him coming in the door, and then I'd stop the camera. And then he'd change clothes, and he'd go sit in the chair, and I'd film him in the chair as he turned toward the door to see who it was. Then I'd stop filming. And then he'd change back into the other clothes, and I'd film him walking through the door saying, "Hey, I'm here." And we made the whole movie like that.
You wore him out.
Yeah. But I didn't understand that you could do it another way. And then I kind of figured out, well, if I shoot all him coming in the door at once, and I shoot all him in the chair at once, I can then later cut it up and put it back together in a different order. These are things, obviously, that everybody knows, but I was figuring it out. To me, I thought I was a genius, that I figured out an easier way to make movies. Then I obviously eventually realized that's how movies were actually made. But I came out to Hollywood with the intention of making real movies, and I figured out pretty young that the only difference between making a movie and not making a movie was having the money to get it made. There really is no magic beyond that. I mean, having a career in a movie studio system is a different animal entirely. But if you just want to make a movie, you can make one if you have the money to make it. And the good news is that these days you can make a movie less expensively than has ever been possible before. When I made my first movie, I was 20, and you still had to shoot it on film. You had to develop it. You had to develop the film, you had to print the film, you had to cut it on film. In order for anyone to see it, it had to be projected on film. There was no other way to do it. And now you can shoot a movie on your phone. You can edit it with an app. You can promote it to a worldwide audience on social media. You can post it on YouTube to a worldwide audience. I mean, you can make a movie for nothing if you're clever enough and if you take it seriously enough. You can change your life just by making a great movie for nothing.
Well, I'm just going to interrupt you. I don't think that people fully appreciate the difference between you being 7 and making Super 8 movies and the fact that had a cost. You had
that had a big cost. The idea, it cost $5 for a 2-minute cartridge of Super 8 film. So it might as well have cost $100 at that age. I mean, I would have to save up for the $5. Now you can shoot endless amounts of of footage. If there was the technology that exists today when I was a kid, it would have been so freeing, and I would have been making movies and posting them to YouTube all the time. I would have had fans around the world at 8 years old. Not a lot, but maybe a few. It would have been so much fun. I mean, all my movies, when I would finish them, we'd screen in the backyard on a sheet that was stretched between 2 trees. For 12 friends. That was exciting.
Yeah.
But now you can have fans around the world.
That's very, very true. And not to mention your processing fee of that footage.
Oh, the getting it developed and printed, it took days. You had to wait for it to come back. You'd take it to the photo mat or wherever, and they'd send it off, and it would come back days later.
And then
it was a different process. You had to cut it and wind it. It was very different.
So it really, I mean, the advantages today are remarkable, and you make a really good point about you can make a movie for nothing, and it's just the dollars that make the difference. So your first movie at 20, when you're now in Los Angeles, and from there,
I got very lucky. I had written a script. The first script I ever wrote was a movie that I had made several years later called The Dark Backward. And I used that script to start knocking on doors and trying to find money to get it made. And I met a young producer named Brad Wyman, who had just produced his first film. You know Brad.
I know Brad.
And Brad was working for an old-time producer named Elliot Kastner, who produced a bunch of Brando movies and Clint Eastwood movies and Jack Nicholson movies and Richard Burton movies and all kinds of movies. And Elliot was funding low-budget movies because the straight-to-video market was booming at that time. It was a relatively brand new market. If it could be 90 minutes long in color and have some exploitive elements to it, it would make money. And so every producer was cranking them out. And so we convinced Elliot that he should fund our first film. And he didn't want to fund The Dark Backward, but he said if I wrote something if I had something that could appeal to teenagers, he would fund it. So I said, I have something for teenagers, and I'll bring it in. He said, bring it in tomorrow. I said, can I bring it in on Monday? This was maybe Tuesday. I said, can I bring it in on Monday? I need to just clean it up a little bit. He said, okay. So I ran home and I wrote a script that I thought could appeal to teenagers, and I brought it in on Monday, and I don't even think he ever really read it. I think he asked Brad and Brad's partner at the time, who was Elliot's stepson, Cassian Elwes, who's also a prolific producer. They were all working for Elliot at the time. He asked them, does this script appeal to teens? Will the kids like it? And they said, oh yeah. So he said, okay, go ahead and make it. So he just let us make this film, and it was called Never on Tuesday. It was my first film.
Wow. And from there, you not only directed other films, but you've appeared in some of them, and you've also written for the studios and independents, correct?
Correct. I never really saw myself as a writer, nor did I ever want to pursue writing, but I had to write in order to have something to direct. I knew nobody would let me direct anything unless there was some reason I was connected to the material, and so if I had written it and they liked it, I knew that I would get to direct it, or at least I thought I'd get to direct it. But because, you got to kind of keep as many balls in the air as possible in Hollywood, I would write movies that I knew I wanted to direct, and I would also write movies that I knew I would try and sell the scripts. And along my travels, there were instances where the script that I wrote would sell, and that would afford me the freedom to then be able to make an independent film where I didn't, I knew I wouldn't make any money doing it. You can't make a lot of money on independent films, unless, of course, you make Paranormal Activity or something like that, and you make a movie for nothing, and it makes hundreds of millions of dollars and spawns many sequels. And I mean, that's like winning the lottery, I mean, but if you just want to be an independent filmmaker and make films you're passionate about, it's not the easiest way to make a big money-making living. So I would write these scripts that I would hope to sell. Sometimes they would sell, and then because every once in a while they would sell, sometimes I would get hired to write scripts for the studio. So I wrote a bunch of family films that all, like I said, afforded me the freedom to get to make independent films I was more passionate about. I love doing it, by the way. I mean, I love all kinds of films. I love big films and little films and family films and horror films and dramas and all kinds of films. So I love doing all kinds of different projects. But I've been lucky that I've gotten to write movies for studios, and I've also gotten to write and direct movies that I'm passionate about.
Very cool. Now, recently, there's a couple of things in your recent background. One is Giuseppe, the documentary, which I'd like to talk a little bit about, and also the new movie with Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller.
Right. So Giuseppe Makes a Movie is the first documentary I ever directed, and it's about a maverick avant-garde filmmaker named Giuseppe Andrews, who lives in a trailer park and who has cranked out, at this point, by the time when I made the film, he made about 30 films. Now he's made over 100 films, feature films. He lives in a trailer park, and the stars of all his films are the homeless people that live around the trailer park. That's his sort of repertory company of performers. I met Giuseppe because he used to be a child actor, and he was in a film I made called Detroit Rock City. And he was the first one to come into audition. The movie Detroit Rock City is about 14s trying to sneak into a Kiss concert in 1978. And he came in, and there was just something about him that was unique, and I cast him immediately. And then while we were shooting the film, while the other three kids between takes would be off playing video games or smoking the dope, Giuseppe would be hanging out on set and just want to talk about movies. He loved film, and he was just taking film in like a sponge. He was watching all the foreign films that he could, Fassbender films and Ingmar Bergman films and Buñuel films, Pasolini films, just loved film and wanted to talk about becoming a filmmaker. And I was very encouraging to him, and I told him that if you really want to be a filmmaker, don't wait for permission. Just start making films for whatever amount of money you can afford. I said the technology has finally caught up with people's ambition. And so if you want to make a film badly enough, whatever amount of money you have, you can make a film for it. So he started cranking out film after film after film with this crazy cast of characters. And he'd show them to me, and they were the wildest things I had ever seen. And so finally I said to him, after I'd seen about, 25, 28 of them, I said, I need to document what you're doing here. I want to make a documentary about you making one of these films. So that's what Giuseppe Makes a Movie is about, and it came out this year, and it played a whole bunch of film festivals and got great reviews, and it's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is very exciting, and got a theatrical release, and it's coming out this summer on Blu-ray and on VHS.
Wow.
Which is kind of a fun thing.
VHS.
It's coming out on VHS. Sort of more as a collector's item kind of vibe gimmick thing, but it's fun. I mean, it's in keeping with the style of Giuseppe's movies,
No, it's awesome. It's awesome. I love it. Now, somebody here somebody sent a question and said that this was one of their favorite. Ben,
yeah,
one of your favorite films.
Yeah,
So,
I really loved it. I saw it a couple months ago in the Union Theater.
And they showed it here at the. Well, how do you like that? They showed it here at the college.
I love it. Thank you very much.
Did you have a question or?
Yeah, I guess. What did you learn from Giuseppe? Giuseppe's process.
I'll tell you what I learned from Giuseppe, and I take inspiration from it as often as I can. When I wrote my first script, I wrote it purely from a place of wanting to write a movie that I wanted to see, and I was not influenced by anything other than just my love of movies and my want to make a movie that I'd never seen before. And after I wrote that first script, and after it was read by people in Hollywood, and after it was turned down by a lot of people, and after it took years to get made, I found and continue to find myself influenced by outside voices. When I think of an idea of a script I want to write, I can't help but think, is this idea financeable? Is this role castable? Is this genre accessible? Who is this movie for? All these things come into my mind. I can't help it. I've been conditioned at this point. I still try to be as original as I can, but to greater or lesser degrees, depending on the project, those influences haunt me. Giuseppe is a pure artist. He does not care who sees his films, because he's making them just because he loves the process of making them. So what he makes his films about, who he stars in his films, what his films turn out like, he is not influenced by anything other than the joy of the process. And I find that very inspiring, and I always try to remember that because it's so rare.
Good point. Good point. Anything else?
That was my big question. I really loved it. Giuseppe was really an interesting character.
Thank you very much. He is certainly an interesting character, and he is a very unique guy, and he is a brilliant artist. Not only does he make films, but he makes amazing music, and he writes amazing books and poems, and he draws, and you can check out all his stuff on his website, giuseppeandrews.net. And but be warned. I mean, his stuff is really crazy. But he's an artist. He's an artist. I don't think his films can be judged in the same way that you would judge, a traditional film. I mean, you have to judge them in a different context.
You judge them against himself.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't compare it. You just look at it. Wow. Well, you are also one of those kind of rare artists, avant-garde madmen in your mind of trying different things. The couple of the movie that you did, Look, and that became the series, and then the other series that you did.
Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, but you know that I think this, but I mean, because I do. But you've reached beyond a lot of things. So let's talk a little bit about Look first, if you don't mind. I know I asked you about Penn's movie, and we'll come back to that. But for you, if you don't know, he did a movie called Look, and then he did a Showtime series, and then you've got to talk about the follow-up series that you did, which was a different series. But Adam plays a very unscrupulous producer, which you know nothing about. You've never met anyone like that.
I've never met anybody like that in Hollywood. Well, Look, the idea of Look was, and I made Look now a while ago, so things have exploded since then. It was a slightly more novel concept when we first made it. But the idea behind Look is that the average American is captured on camera. At the time we made it, about 150 times a day. Now it's many hundreds of times a day. And so I wanted to make a movie about 4 or 5 different interweaving storylines, all from the point of view of the surveillance cameras that capture us all day, every day. So what if somebody had access to all the footage that you ever passed in front of and was able to cut it together and tell the story of your life, And so that movie turned out really well, and it did really well, and it won a bunch of big film festivals, and got a theatrical release, and its success spawned a television series based on it called Look the Series for Showtime. And by the time we did the series, things had escalated just in our culture. I mean, the movie was all about the eye in the sky. It was about the surveillance cameras on street corners and in buildings and ATM machines. Then Look, the series included, in addition to those, cell phone cameras, web cameras, all the different, social media, all the different ways that, we're under surveillance at all times by the, eye in the sky, and then there's all the surveillance we voluntarily put ourselves under through all the cameras we choose, like we are doing right now.
Exactly.
Or on Twitter, or on Facebook, or whatever. So the series dealt with that. And then that was really fun, and so that did well for Showtime, and so then they said to me, because it was meant to be one complete story. It was 11 episodes that was one complete story. So then they said to me, would you like to do another one of those for us? And I said, yes, I would. So they said, well, what would you like to do? So I had an idea for a film, but I thought that it would also make a good series called Reality Show. And so we made a 10-episode miniseries for Showtime called Reality Show. The basic idea is that a reality show producer who has been successful producing all the kinds of reality shows that you're familiar with feels that the reality genre has jumped the shark, because everybody knows everything about reality television is anything but real. It's all fake. So he decides he's going to bring reality back to reality television, and he's going to pick a family at random, and he's going to put them under 24-hour surveillance, complete, comprehensive surveillance, but without their knowledge. He feels that the cameras in people's faces influence their behavior, and that's why it's all so fake. So if a family has no idea that they are the stars of a show, they will be 100% real, and it will be all the more compelling because we're all voyeurs. But what he finds out very quickly is that reality is boring. People are just not that interesting in real life. So at the network's prodding, he starts to inject conflict into their lives, because conflict is the cornerstone of drama. And he does this secretly so that they will have issues to have to deal with, so that it'll make the show more interesting. And it's working, and it's making the show much more interesting, but little by little, it's tearing the family apart. But his rationalization is that once these episodes air, and once they're rich and famous, fame will heal all wounds, and he'll be a hero. And it gets pretty dark once it starts going down the rabbit hole. And I'll say, and you were familiar with this, I know already, after the show aired, and it did very well on Showtime,
I love this.
I took the episodes, and because the original idea was always to do it as a movie in the first place, I took all 10 episodes and I re-edited them down into a 90-minute film. And that film premiered opening night of South by Southwest.
Oh, not that one, but...
Right, and then it played a number of other film festivals. You were at the LA Film Festival.
Yeah.
It is now finally getting a theatrical release this year. It's coming out this summer. And the movie is called Shooting the Warwicks.
Shooting the Warwicks?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Watch for it. It is a ride. It is a ride.
There is, I should say, there is precedent of re-editing a television series into a movie. Ingmar Bergman did it with Fanny and Alexander. And I figure if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So.
And that brings us now. I mean, there's so many other things we could talk about, and they may have other questions too. But let's now go to Penn and how that came about, and what's happening with Penn's and your movie.
Sure. A couple of years ago, I got a Facebook message out of the blue from Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller, who I'd always been a fan of. And he wrote me a note and said that he just saw my film Look, and he loved it, and said some very complimentary things about it, and he wanted to discuss it with me. And it was Friday evening when I got the Facebook private message. So I wrote him back and said, very flattered that you contacted me, and I'm a big fan, and I know it's Friday night, so if you want to call me anytime over the weekend, here's my number. And I left my number. And 2 seconds later, my phone rang, and it was Penn Jillette. And he said some more very, very nice things about my film Look. And he said that he had written a screenplay, and that after seeing Look, he felt that I should direct it, which I was very flattered by. And he asked me if I would. And I said, well, generally I prefer to direct what I've written, but I said I'd happily read it. And so he sent it to me, and I read it then and there, just right then. And I called him a couple hours later, and I told him this is a very smart, very creative idea, and I'm in. And the basic idea is it's a very dark comedy, very sort of warped and twisted comedy. about a stalker who is obsessed with an actress. And she is currently starring in a film that was crowdfunded. So the stalker buys access to the set by purchasing a line in the film and by purchasing a producer credit on the film. And so now that he has access to the film, and he has access to the actress that he is obsessed with, he kidnaps her off the set, and he brings her to his little basement / movie studio / dungeon, which he's sort of set up with a cheap green screen and some cameras and some props. And he attempts to reshoot much of the film, starring himself opposite her as her new romantic lead. And he then takes the finished footage from the real film, and he takes the footage that he shot, and he combines them into this very twisted mashup of what he calls his director's cut. And the movie is called Director's Cut. And the whole movie is narrated by his director's commentary. And it's turning out really, really well. We're almost done with the initial cut of I should say we're almost locked. We almost have a locked picture. Then we have sound work and visual effects work to do and everything. But it's a very unusual film, and we're really excited about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how is this movie financed?
This movie actually was crowdfunded as well, so it's a little meta in that it's a crowdfunded movie about a crowdfunded movie.
Yeah, no, it's all brilliant. It's all you guys, you know, that you both of you push the envelope, and that's very cool that you've worked together now. That's awesome.
Thank you. No, we've been having a blast, and he's great, and he's super smart and creative, and I think I can't wait for people to be able to see this movie because I believe it's gonna be unlike anything anybody's ever seen. I seek out unusual films, and I have never seen a film like this film that we're making right now, so hopefully everybody else will feel the same way.
Well, you've made it your share. So, any questions while we're at it? Somebody want to chime in with a question? They email me questions beforehand, but then they never voice them when we're in class. I don't get them. Come on, don't be shy. You got one?
Yeah. I was wondering. I was looking over your IMDb page, and I noticed you work in a very broad range of genres. I was wondering how you switch between those so quickly, and how that affects the process.
That's a good question. I will tell you.
And that's Nick, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nick. That's a very good question. I will tell you this. That has been a detriment to my career, but it has been something that I can't imagine doing any other way. I love all kinds of movies. I love serious movies and funny movies. I love big movies and small movies. I love kids' movies. I love grown-up movies. And many of my favorite movies are, I don't just love one genre of movie. I love all genres of movie. Good movies in any genre, I love them. So I want to make movies in all kinds of different genres. I mean, many of my favorite filmmakers make movies in one genre. They've mastered that genre. They do it over and over again. Like Alfred Hitchcock, suspense. He mastered suspense. He did suspense his whole career. Nobody did it better. He's a genius. We love Alfred Hitchcock. But then there are directors like Billy Wilder, who make dramas and crime films and comedies and all kinds of different films. And I love that too. John Huston, so I can't just make films in one genre, so I always write what I want to make and what I want to see. And in Hollywood, it's easier for the town as a whole to see you in a certain way and know how to categorize you, and you're then that go-to person. Like Judd Apatow, comedy, right? He has a brand. He has mastered that brand brilliantly, and nobody is confused. When you say it's a Judd Apatow film, whether he produced it, directed it, or just in some way blessed it, you know the kind of movie it is. And that's fantastic. And that's why he is as successful as a person can possibly be in this town. Because I have not been easy to categorize, it has been very hard for Hollywood to pigeonhole me. And so it's been a struggle in that regard. But, I couldn't do it any other way.
Fair enough. Awesome. Anyone else? Quickly? Yes.
Hello, Adam. My name's Steven, or I like to call you Rifkin, which is a name too. I was wondering, when you were hired by 20th Century Fox to write and direct a new version of Planet of the Apes, were you paid for the work that you did, and how were your feelings when you found out that the project had been shelved? Were your hopes and dreams of making this movie crushed, or did you just take it as a learning experience?
Well, it was my first big studio movie job, so I had very, very high hopes. For those of you who don't know, thanks for the question, by the way, it's a good question. For those of you who don't know, when I was 21, after my first film was finished, I got an opportunity to, prior to the existence of the word, I was hired to reboot the Planet of the Apes franchise. I was hired to write and direct the next Planet of the Apes, and my idea was to take the franchise in another direction. I had made Never on Tuesday, like I told you, and we screened it for all the studios to sell it. It was an independent film, and it didn't end up being bought by 20th Century Fox, but the president of 20th Century Fox at the time told me that he liked the film and liked me and wanted to work with me, and what did I want to do? Because he'd like to do something together. So I said I want to bring back Planet of the Apes, and I pitched him my idea, which was basically that we do an alternate sequel to the first film. We open the movie with Charlton Heston on the beach, screaming up at the Statue of Liberty sticking out of the sand, and then we fade to black, and then it says 300 years later. And then it comes up, and the apes had reached their Roman era, right? And so basically I pitched Spartacus with apes. So a descendant of Charlton Heston leads a human revolt against the ape empire, basically. And they dug it, and they hired me to write and direct it. And I wrote the script, and he loved the script, and his only notes on the script were, "It's a little long, can you shave about 10 pages out?" And then those were the notes.
Wow.
Right? It was incredible. And we were about to start opening pre-production, our production offices, and we were talking to amazing people to be in it and to work behind the scenes on it, and it was really a dream come true project. And it's all detailed in a book called Tales from the Development Hell, in much more detail than I'm giving you now. But just as we were about to open our offices, that studio head was fired, and the new studio head shelved the project, because as is often the case, the new studio head doesn't want anything to do with the old regime's projects. And so I was extremely disappointed, but, and I guess it's just my personality, but, like you asked, did I just see it as a learning experience? It was a big learning experience. It was my first big Hollywood life lesson. But I didn't allow it to slow me down, because in Hollywood there is so much rejection that you have to deal with on a daily basis. You just have to be able to not even let it register on your radar. It's just can't even blip on your radar. Yes, it was absolutely devastating that the movie didn't get made, and my dreams of being, bringing back Planet of the Apes were dashed. But I allowed myself to be bummed about it for a day, and then you just have to get back to work. It's like you have to kind of think of navigating through Hollywood like a GPS device, right? So you're going along on your path towards success, and suddenly there's construction in the road that you didn't expect. Well, suddenly you have to take a turn, and your GPS says, recalculating, and finds you a different route. You just have to take another route, and you can't let it slip. I know a lot of people who take rejection very personally, and no matter how many times they know they shouldn't, they can't help it. They just do. and it slows them down. They get depressed for weeks or months over a setback. You have to just let it be water off a duck's back. You just can't let it even register. You just move forward. And so that's what I did.
Awesome. Awesome advice.
And by the way, I mean, I think that that version that I started exchanged hands many times throughout the years. I mean, that went to Oliver Stone, then it went to Christopher Columbus, then it went to James Cameron, and eventually that became the Tim Burton version of Planet of the Apes. And then it was totally rebooted again in this new version of the franchise, which I think these new ones are actually really good. So, I mean, but that's just how Hollywood. You just have to know that's just the way it works sometimes.
Fair enough. Others? So what advice, while they're percolating, what advice would you give the individual who graduates film school and decides, I want to move to LA? I mean, what can they expect to encounter from trying to find a place to live to going to the beach, to making a career?
Well, I mean, I love living here because this is where movies are made, and I love
history.
Hollywood. What's that?
I say it's the history which keeps disappearing. They keep demolishing landmarks and homes and everything else. But I mean, the idea that you can walk into somebody's home that was owned by so and 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 so, and all these ghosts reside there. I mean, it's an amazing town.
It's true. I lived in an apartment once in Hollywood for a few years that I learned was the apartment that one of the writers of all the Three Stooges used to live in, and he wrote many of the Three Stooges shorts in that apartment. I thought that was pretty cool.
Now, I've got to tell you, I lived in Soundstage 1. Did I ever tell you this?
Yes, I love that
Okay,
story, yeah.
Columbia Studios on Sunset and Gower, where apparently they made that is supposed to be, correct me, if anybody knows, where they shot the Three Stooges shorts.
Fantastic.
Yeah, now it's a parking ramp, but at the time...
Exactly. But what I would recommend is, I mean, here, like moving to any town, I mean, do a little research, about, where a good place for you, where you might fit. Los Angeles is a huge city. It's all spread out. There's all sorts of different areas. Do your research, what areas do you want to live in? Do you want to live by the beach? Do you want to live downtown? Do you want to live in Silver Lake is kind of, a hip spot part of town right now. Do you want to live in Beverly Hills? Wherever you want to live, I mean, look into that, do your homework. But everywhere you go, you're going to smell Hollywood. The great thing and the frustrating thing about living in this town is that it's all right there. It's so close you can touch it all. You drive down the street and there's Paramount Pictures, and you drive down this street and there's Universal, and you drive down this street and there's 20th Century Fox, and there's movies being shot on street corners, and you go to certain restaurants and there's always famous people at certain restaurants. And I mean, Hollywood is in the air everywhere you go. It's an industry town. Like you go to D.C., you're going to see politicians everywhere. You know what I mean? But I would say you just have to be very, very hardworking and very serious about pursuing what you want. It's also easy for a lot of people to get sucked into the scene. You know what I mean? And they think that going out and being seen and doing, all the partying and the club stuff is part of the work. Maybe it is for some people, but it never has been for me. For me, I'd rather spend that time writing another script or trying to get the script that I just finished better by doing another draft of it, or I'm a bit of a workaholic, so maybe I'm the wrong person to get advice from in terms of what's fun in Hollywood to do. Because to me, work is fun. All I want to do is make movies, so everything I do towards making movies and making movies, to me, is what's fun. But I would say if you really want to make films, just like I said to Giuseppe, you don't have to wait for permission anymore to make a movie. I mean, yeah, it's hard to get to direct a giant Marvel movie that costs $200 million, I mean, nobody's going to hand that to you when you walk into Hollywood. But if you really want to make a film, you can make one now, because you can shoot it on the technology you probably have in your pocket at the moment. Movie cameras used to be big and bulky and expensive to rent, and now you can shoot a movie on an iPhone. You can shoot a movie with a GoPro. You can shoot a movie with a prosumer camcorder. just make it good. You know, a buddy of mine made Paranormal Activity, Oren Pele. I mean, he made it for a few $1,000s in his house. But because it was scary and because he did a good job, it got accepted into Slam Dance. And because the audience was scared out of their minds, a buyer from DreamWorks bought it. And because, and it sat on a shelf for 2.5 years at DreamWorks because they didn't know what to do with it. They're like, we're DreamWorks, we can't theatrically release a movie that costs a few $1,000s. We probably should remake it, right? We probably should remake it in a big way with Sandra Bullock. That was part of one of the plans that they were going to do, you know? But instead they tested it for audiences and saw that audiences were freaking out. And so they thought, all right, well, we will release it. And it is a hit. And then they make sequels, and now he's an empire, you know what I mean? So that can happen. I mean, after Blair Witch Project, everybody said, I want to make the next Blair Witch Project. And a lot of really bad movies were made, and none of them were the next Blair Witch Project. But Oren Pele said, I want to make the next Blair Witch Project, and he did a good job making one, and he did have the next Blair Witch Project. So now, instead of saying, I want to do the next Blair Witch Project, people are saying, I want to do the next Paranormal Activity. If you don't want to do the next Paranormal Activity, do the next Pi. You know what I mean? Pi was actually shot on film. The whole movie was like, what, $10,000, $15,000? And that started Darren Aronofsky. I mean, you can make a movie for nothing, but if it's good, it can get accepted into a film festival, it can change your life. By the way, if it's good, it can also not get accepted into a film festival, and it cannot change your life. And that's when you should sit down and think about what the next movie you want to make is and make another one, you know? Just don't, think of it this way also. This is another piece of advice I've given to people. If you're a boxer and you take it personally when people punch you in the face, you'd be a really shitty boxer, right? Because that's the job, to get punched in the face. And while you're getting punched in the face, you might get in a few good punches yourself, right? So pursuing a career in the arts is the same way. I mean, you're going to get rejected up and down. That's you being punched in the face. You can't take it personally. And just keep throwing punches yourself. And maybe one of them will land. Maybe you'll have another Paranormal Activity. Maybe you won't, but at least you're making movies and you're doing what you love to do. You know? You just got to keep pursuing it.
I really appreciate that. And one of the things that I also appreciate about what you just said was if you got a good movie, it could become the next Paranormal Activity. Or it could go nowhere. I mean, in other words, that there is a reality to that too. And then you said just make another movie. I mean, in other words, you can't let what happens to your product or your art determine what your future is going to be. You need to continue as if you were going to continue anyway.
It's true. I've seen great movies at film festivals or films that people I knew had made. Great movies that never saw the light of day. And that's how it works also sometimes. But you just can't let that slow you down. I mean, anybody who says, well, I gave it my best shot, I tried it out in Hollywood, and I failed. I'm going back home now. You didn't fail. You quit. Right? Because there is no failing. Because there's no end to the opportunities that you can create for yourself. You just have to have the ability to be able to keep fighting and keep creating. You know? I mean, there's no failure in Hollywood. There's just quitting.
Oh, that's an excellent way to put it. I appreciate that. Yeah, and anything can derail a project. I mean, and or an opening. You know, you can make a movie, it can be primed and ready to go, and it can go up against something else, or it can open on the wrong date, or 9/11 could happen. I mean, there's everybody has a story of how things have gone wrong at the moment that they anticipated great success, but just don't quit.
It's true. It's true.
Excellent. I'm going to check with the people. Any other questions back here while I'm turned around? Yes, Grant.
I have a question about just screenwriting and the process. If there's a difference between writing on spec and if you have something that's commissioned by like a studio or something, and if you prefer either of them or and just any experience you've had with them.
That is a very good question as well. The difference between every writer has their own process, and whatever works for you is the right process for you. I had a lunch one time with, it was an amazing lunch to be at. I was brought to the lunch by my mentor, John Landis, and it was a lunch with Ray Harryhausen and Ray Bradbury, right? And I asked Ray Bradbury, and I just sat and listened to them talk the whole time. It was just fascinating. And except I did ask Ray Bradbury what his writing process was. I said, do you plot things out? Do you use note cards? Do you, whatever, what's your process? He said, I just transcribe what's whispered into my ear. And I thought that was a beautiful line, you know. Some people I know are extraordinarily detailed in their process. They write out note cards. Not only do they write out a description of every scene that is going to be in the script, but they write out the number of pages that scene is going to be. So that when they write out that scene and that page number, by the time they reach the end of the script, they have a 110-page script. I mean, I don't do it that way. That's very, but if that works for them, great. I do a rough outline. I know what's going to happen in Act 1. I know what's going to happen in Act 2. I know what's going to happen in Act 3. I know the beats, the rough beats, and I know very intimately who the characters are, what they're like, and what their voices are, and how they would react in any situation. So when something happens to them, I know how they would react to that situation. But the difference between writing on spec and writing for hire is that when I'm writing on spec, I write out my rough outline, I know what I'm going to write, and then I just write it. When you're writing for hire, and especially when you're trying to get a writing job, and then once you've gotten it, writing for hire, you have to do a lot more steps to get the job and also to get permission to start writing the script. So there's a lot more beat sheets that you're turning in. There's a lot more treatments that you're having to write to get the job. And truth be told, when you're writing treatments to get a writing job, you don't necessarily know all the details of what the script is going to be until you start writing it. But you have to write a sales tool to get the writing job. So the treatments that you're writing to get a writing job are more of a sales tool than they are an actual treatment or actual beat sheet, because things change as they evolve. But the system as it exists now, the process as it exists now, is if somebody wants a writer, or if somebody's paying you to write a script, they want to see all the steps leading up to prior to you starting to write the script, so that they can sign off on all the different steps. And so it's a lot more time-consuming of a process, because most of the time I've written so many treatments to get the job that I could have written it on spec by the time I've gotten the job, you know? But that's just the way it is. And that's, you know, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is, you know?
Thank you.
Other question? Well, let me ask. Going back to Brad Wyman, and can you talk a little bit about The Chase?
Yes, absolutely.
That would be great. One of my favorite actors' friends, and then of course Charlie Sheen, and how was it for that movie? Was fairly early for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was about 26 when I made that film. It was a very low-budget, little car crash movie inspired by a movie called Vanishing Point.
Yeah.
That was a really fun little car action, low-budget movie starring Barry Newman. Anyway.
That was remade. Somebody remade it. I don't know whatever happened to the remake, but I certainly remember the first one.
Yeah, I haven't seen the remake. Anyway, that was an opportunity to Charlie Sheen was a friend of mine and Brad's. And he had a small window of availability between movies. And so in thinking of what would be a movie that we could make with Charlie, where we could shoot him in and out in 3 weeks, but still have him be in the whole movie, the idea came up, well, what if we did a movie that was just one long car chase? And we can shoot out Charlie in the car in his 3 weeks, and then we could shoot whatever else we needed to shoot before and after him. And that's how that came about. So I wrote it on spec really fast. And Brad and Cassie and Ellis, again, they put it together. And it was a small little indie movie. But here's another thing about Hollywood being that, it's all perception in Hollywood. The Chase was made as a small independent film that got picked up by 20th Century Fox and was released by 20th Century Fox and did modestly well. It was the number 3 profit-making movie that year for 20th Century Fox. But because the perception was that it was a studio film that underperformed, it didn't help me really. The reality was it was an independent film that did really well. But that wasn't the perception because it wasn't bought at a film festival. It was just quietly bought behind the scenes by Fox and released by Fox. So it looked like it was a Fox movie. And we were thrilled when we teamed up with Fox on it because suddenly we're going to get a studio release for our little car crash movie. But if the perception was 20th Century Fox obtains independent action film The Chase, and if that were the perception going in, everybody would be thrilled at whatever amount of money that it made. It would cost a few $1 million to make. It made $20 million. That's a huge success, But, perception is everything in Hollywood.
This is, again, great for everyone to know. Also, the reasoning behind how the film came about. We wanted to do a movie with Charlie, so could we do during his window of availability? And a lot of projects come about for those reasons. They're not just somebody sitting at home in their apartment going, okay, I have a movie in mind that I want to write. They are driven by other factors.
It's true. It happens all the time. I mean, if you read books about or hear interviews with, old Roger Corman movies, a lot of times, he'd say, hey, we have an abandoned old hospital available to us. Let's write a movie set in an abandoned old hospital, make a scary movie. That happens all the time. So
driven by need or want, I mean, you can do it however you like.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's go back a little bit and talk about the crowdfunding process. Now, this was a little bit different because of the celebrities that got involved that made it a fun crowdfunding event to see who came out, to help Penn be darker.
Right. Well, Penn had always had this fantasy to play a bad guy. Right. So that's why he wrote this script. And so the hook of our crowdfunding campaign was help make Penn bad. Yeah. So that was kind of the hook. Crowdfunding, we learned a lot from crowdfunding. It was a lot easier to crowdfund this project than it otherwise would have been because Penn is famous.
Right.
I mean, just plain and simple. Penn has 2 million Twitter followers. He's very actively engaged with them. He answers every tweet. And, so when he would talk to his fan base about helping to fund this movie, they were receptive. But I will tell you this, if anybody is thinking about crowdfunding, it's for the duration of time that you are crowdfunding a project, for it to be effective, even with Penn being famous, I would say, it is full-time work. If you're running for mayor, it is full-time work. A campaign is a campaign. So if you're running a crowdfunding campaign, if you want to raise $10,000 to make a small film, you have to work that campaign all day, every day. I mean, Penn did interviews every day, podcasts every day, Ask Me Anythings. He did whatever he could, Twitter chats. He did whatever he could. He did not, for a minute, just say, oh, well, I'm famous. I tweeted it a couple times. That's all I need to do. There are a lot of people more famous than Penn who have had failed crowdfunding campaigns because they just didn't work the campaign. You have to work it all day, every day. You have to get the word out. And he did that, and it really helped a lot.
I'm glad you said that because one of our friends has been involved with crowdfunding, and
yes.
at the top. And then I have other friends. So we'll have somebody next week actually who's going to be talking about crowdfunding here from Indiegogo, John Dragonis. But I have consulted on and been party to a number of campaigns, and I mean you're absolutely right. It's like if as a producer, raising the money is a full-time job, and crowdfunding is a full-time job. And in fact, people tell you not to even launch a campaign until you have certain ducks in the row because if you don't have enough of a social following, if you're not doing enough ancillary or support outside of the crowdfunding, if you're still not hitting your uncles and aunts and doing car washes and cookie sales and things like that, you may not make it because you can't just assume. And I think a lot of people have that idea. Well, I can make a movie. I just go crowdfund it. That it's going to be, I put up a poster and say, here are my perks, and everybody's just going to flock to it. But the reality of today is just like anything else. How do you drive people to your site? How do you get their attention? And then two, how do you get them to want to be a party to what you're offering? Now, in Penn's case, I mean, like you said, it's celebrity and many other things regarding that, but still an awesome amount of work.
An enormous amount of work, and you're absolutely right. You don't even start your campaign if you don't have your ducks in a row. And again, I liken it to running for mayor. If you're going to run for mayor, you got to make sure when you do your first when you do your first press conference, that you have all the people standing behind you who are going to be your first voters. You know what I mean? You've got your campaign manager, you've got your spouse, you've got your friends and your family, and all the people who support you to be the mayor, all standing on stage. So you need all those ducks in a row first. You need a great pitch video. You need to stand out from the crowd. There's so many things you need to have figured out before you launch that you really need to put the work into.
How did when you think about it, you write movies and you direct movies, and then you have to write a campaign and you direct a campaign. You or the team, that's part of it. How do you think about that? In terms of orchestra, because you've got videos that you create or that the team creates. You've got celebrities, in your case, with the Penn movie, that celebrities that came on to say, help make Penn bad, but the orchestration of that is it fair to say it's just that part of it is just as involved as not only pre-producing a movie, but the development of the movie. You have to develop the campaign. You have to.
It's absolutely just like that. It's no different than when you're making a movie. You have to do the necessary prep work. When we shot our crowdfunding video, we prepped it just like a movie. We had a crew there, just like a movie. It didn't cost us anything. We got a lot of favors, and we pulled in, friends and things like that. But we had to put in the work to get the people there, and to get the props there, and to get the costumes there, and to get everything there, to get the right location. It required work, just like when you're prepping a movie,
So, how did you get to be so twisted? You you have the dark backward. You've got look. You've got reality show. You've got making Penn bad. You have a really. One of the things, Adam, I've always admired about you is you have just a unique take on things.
Thank you. I don't know. That's a good question. I guess I've been watching some pretty out there movies from as early as I can remember. That must have had some influence,
But do you second guess? If we had to kind of get into a little bit of your creative process, is there something that you, just that when I think about the notion of, I think it was 2000, the year 2000 or 2001, somewhere in there, or shortly thereafter, I was at a dinner party and we were talking about and it may have been slightly later, talking about the fact that people could now videotape anything they wanted on their phones. And I was like, I don't know if this is a good thing. I think it's going to open up, a Pandora's box. And while there will be good coming from it, there's also going to be probably harm from it, an invasion of privacy, stuff like that. But I didn't then go that step and go, well, what if we made a movie about that? Whereas, you look at surveillance stuff and you go, wow, what if we edit something together regarding stories that are caught on. So is there a second or third step in your creative process where you look at something and go, movie, now how do I make it different? Or
I don't know if it's a second or third step. As corny as it sounds, I just kind of look at everything through the eye of, could this work as a movie? You know what I mean?
The perpetual lens finder.
Yeah, basically. I'm just always, everything I'm looking at and doing and thinking about, even if it's not conscious, it's just always in there. Is this something that I should tuck away as a germ of an idea for a movie? You know, and so that is a good example of one. Couple of things really kind of spawned that idea. One, I got a red light camera ticket, and when they sent the ticket to me, and the picture of me running the light was clear as day, I thought, that's interesting. I didn't know that camera was there. And then there was another instance where I was in a Target or something, and every aisle had a camera in it. And I was imagining what it looked like if I had all the footage that I could cut together, going down this aisle, going down that aisle, cut to this angle as I'm coming around this aisle. And I just thought, these two ideas kind of made me think, you could probably tell a story with this footage if you had enough of it, because I was at the ATM machine earlier, there's a camera there. I was walking down the street, I know there was a camera on that corner. So that's where the idea kind of percolated. Some ideas hit me like that, and I just sit down and write them really fast, and some ideas just sort of simmer for years, and then one day I just think, I think the time might be right for this idea right now, so.
It's amazing because I was 11 years old, I was at the UN, and I was taking at that time it was probably a Kodak Brownie camera or something like that. I was taking a picture of the UN, and this girl ran in front, and so now the UN is obscured by this blurry head. And my mom, I said some jerk ran in front of the camera. Well, my mom put that in a photo album with that caption below it. So for years, so I don't know who this girl is. I don't know, because she's kind of obscured. You can't really tell, didn't anything. But it always stuck in my mind that here I captured some stranger on film, and then decades later, when cell phones were around, and I would be at an event or you'd be at a Hollywood function on the street, and just know that people are taking pictures. You go, we're being captured in people's cell phones all around the world, and showing up in their Thanksgiving videos or their travel logs or whatever that we don't know because we just happened to be coming out of Chinese theater when they were shooting their son putting his hands in the cement, of John Wayne or something, and to me, it just becomes this kind of phenomenal notion of
there's thousands. I mean, I'm sure all of us are.
Everyone.
Thousands of people's family photos and videos throughout our whole lives, and friends' photos.
But even more so today, because you can hardly not go anywhere without somebody holding a phone up and videotaping it. So
it's true. It's true.
But what's your creative process? It's that notion that you're thinking constantly about what might be a movie, and the notion of not quitting. And one of the things we've talked a lot about in this class is attitude, and how attitude helps you navigate Hollywood or LA.
Well, that's a good topic to talk about, I'll say, because attitude is so important for a number of reasons. I know a lot of people who, let's say, just for the sake of argument, they want to be writers, right? And the process of getting writing jobs is a lot of, like I said, a lot of writing of beat sheets and treatments and really having to go all out to get the gig. And a lot of people's attitude is, well, I'm not going to write for free. When I get the job and they pay me, then I'll do the work. Well, that's all well and good, but you're not going to get the job if that's your attitude. You just have to you have to have a very proactive mindset, and you have to forget about ego when it comes to this stuff, because there are plenty of people who are super talented, who are really hardworking, who are willing to do that work, and they're going to be the ones to get that gig. So if you're going to be angry, or if you're going to be bitter, or if you're going to think that doesn't sound fair, well, maybe it isn't fair, but it just is the way it works in town right now. So I would say you should try and keep as positive and productive an attitude as possible, and really keep your eye on the big picture, which is, what do you want? You want to write movies? You want to direct movies? You want to make movies? Do whatever you have to do that. I still have to have that attitude. I've had some success, you know what I mean? But I'm still writing treatments for free to book writing gigs. I'm still having to, create video presentations if there's a movie I want to make. You just can't. You have to keep very, very. You have to keep that ego in check and keep Just be happy to be there and happy to work hard because you love making movies and you'll do whatever it takes to make your movie. That's my attitude anyway.
You mentioned Billy Wilder and John Huston, and my guess being that they did a lot of different genres, and it may be that while they were willing to do the different genres, but they were also studio people at the time.
That's true.
So they were, you know, offered or assigned a project that they then said, yeah, I'll do it, and so they had a more eclectic career than, say, someone like Hitchcock who found his niche and stuck with it. But today, it's a different deal. I mean, and I don't mean I'm not equating it with the ability to navigate different genres, but the people I think that there's going to come a time when they're done. They've done the hard work. They've climbed the ladder. They get to the top, and now they can just rest. And
that never seems to happen. And I know people who are very, very, very successful. Okay, now don't get me wrong. I've been very lucky. I've been very fortunate. I feel very happy to have had some of the work that I've gotten to do. But I don't feel as though I'm in any sort of upper echelon like the people who are directing multi-$100-million movies. Right? I'm an independent filmmaker who sometimes writes studio films, and I love doing what I'm doing, and I hope I get to keep doing it. But I know some people who are super successful, right? Filmmakers. And they never feel like they've made it. You know, I've never experienced that feeling. But you always think, well, somebody who's had a giant hit, they must feel that way all the time. Nobody I know feels that way, you know? You've had a big success, but still, you're only as good as your last movie. So the stress now is even greater.
Right.
If your last movie was a big success, now even more eyes are on you that you need to repeat that success, or it can be catastrophic to your career in the bigger picture. You know what I mean? So I don't know anybody who is truly successful who has the attitude that they can just rest on their laurels. Everybody I know who's successful is that way and maintains that level of success because they always feel like they have to keep working harder, they have to keep upping their game, they have to keep the right attitude, and they have to do better next time.
Well, and it also makes sense that they're not doing it to get somewhere to stop doing it.
Exactly.
They're doing it because they're continuing the process of doing what they love, and they keep busy and continue to work, and then there are other factors as well. But it's that pursuit of the dream, and
well, I guess you're absolutely right. It's what do you want to do and why do you want to do it? If you want to do it to get rich,
then once you're rich, you could quit.
Yeah, and there's also probably easier ways to get rich.
Right.
I mean, pursuing a career in Hollywood is hard, and you got to love it. Otherwise, why would you bother? And the people who get rich in Hollywood are few and far between. I mean, it's a glamorous town. It looks like it's a glamorous town, but very few people really get really rich doing this kind of stuff. So I would say that if you really just want to get rich and then retire rich, you should go into something that's a little easier to get rich.
Widgets, toilet paper.
There you go. You'll make way more money if you somehow revolutionize the porta potty in some way that nobody ever thought of before than making movies. But if you love making movies, I mean, everybody that I know, I can only speak actually for myself. I should say, if I won the lottery tomorrow and I suddenly had $1 billion, right? I would use that $1 billion to make more movies. I'd have the freedom suddenly to make all the movies I wanted the way I wanted to make them. I'd help all my friends who had cool movies that they wanted to make that couldn't get their movies made. I'd help them get their movies made. Yeah, I would do great things for the planet too. But in terms of what I do and why I want to do it, I'd use the freedom to make more movies.
We need to hope that some benevolent filmmaker wins the lottery sometime, because right now it doesn't appear that any filmmaker I've ever seen has won a lottery.
We all need to keep playing the lottery.
We
all need to have an agreement with each other that if any of us hit it big, we help each other get our movies.
There you go. I like it. So we all buy our tickets. We have about 15 minutes left at the outside, really. And if somebody has a question, they're certainly willing to jump in and ask it. I wanted to talk a little bit. We've talked about these things before, but the important ingredients in story or the important ingredients of casting, how performance and story, make a difference of setting your script apart and your movie apart, and how people can think along those lines. What is critical for a writer or actor, director to know?
Well, as a director, I will tell you this. You can save a lot of your movie in post-production exception of who you choose as your cast. I mean, if you go into production with a weak script, I don't advise it. But there are ways you can salvage it in post-production. You can create, you can add narration, you can reorder things, you can shoot new scenes, you can add a subplot, in your pickup shoots. There's a lot of ways you can salvage, a mediocre script into in the post-production process to make it a better film. You can salvage bad special effects. You can, by getting you can fix them. You can fix a lot of things, but you can't fix who you cast. Casting is key. And who you cast is really a lot about who the director is. And it's not just the lead actor, it's everybody. A cast of a movie, it's like a band. There's a chemistry of a band. You can't just take out Ringo Starr and plug in, Joe Schmo, and it's still the Beatles. The Beatles are the chemistry of those four people. A movie cast is the same way. So, you got to be really, really careful with who you cast. As far as, and what was the one, how did you word the question with regard to writing?
The elements of structure that set things apart, or the dramatic. I don't remember how I actually structured the question, but the idea being the importance of story and the importance of casting and setting your films apart or your script apart. What makes one story a better written, gripping story than another when it comes to scripting?
In a way, I hate to sound pat about it, but talent is really an important factor that not everybody has.
Right.
There can be a very simple story that has been told, in one way or another many times before, but a really talented, creative, fresh take on that story can just set it apart. It doesn't have to suddenly be something you've never heard of or seen before for it to stand out. It just needs to be good. I read an article, or it was in a book. They asked Woody Allen about his directing choices and why he makes the choices that he makes. And his philosophy is that he just trusts his instinct, that his intuition tells him what the right choices are to make, and he just hopes those are the right choices, and it's just really he trusts his instincts. His answer was really simple, why did he do it a certain way? Well, his instinct told him that might be a good idea to do it that way. There was no philosophy behind why he made certain choices. Maybe he was oversimplifying it. I don't know. But it makes sense to me. There's certain things that, like if it's a comedy, there's certain things that you just think are going to be funny.
Well, I have always said this: if I go to a farmer and say, "Is this a good time to plant?" and he or she says yes or no, and I say, "Well, can you tell?" They go, "Well, my gut tells me it's a good time." I go, "Okay, I'm going to listen to that because they're a farmer." Now, if I go to a farmer and say, "Should I put my money in this stock or buy this bond?" I'd go, I wouldn't do it, right? I would go to somebody who's successful in stocks and bonds. And so I think with Woody Allen, his instinct is based on his years of being a pro.
Well, I think that's a good way to analyze it because, if you love movies, if you watch a lot of movies, if you read about how movies are made by people that you admire, you're going to just sort of by osmosis take on sort of an understanding of movies in a way that maybe somebody who goes to one or two movies a year won't have. So that's how I feel when I trust my instincts. You know what I mean? That said, I know plenty of people who are movie aficionados who have zero talent. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Speaking of Woody Allen, there's a great movie that he made about talent and how non-discriminating it is. It's called Bullets Over Broadway. Mm-hmm. And basically, the playwright, played by John Cusack, who has the passion, who has the drive, and who's doing it for all the right reasons, feels that he deserves the talent because it's coming from a pure place. But what he comes to learn is he just doesn't have the talent, and the mob hitman is the one that has the talent, the one who doesn't give a shit, who kills people for a living, who never gave it a second thought, but the talent just happens to have landed in that guy instead of in him. I just found that to be a great movie about talent and how elusive it is, and why not some people have it, you know.
Agreed. I think also, though, today what we see more of than ever before, and that's because of the ease of which we can make a movie, that we can do it for no cost, is people who have never had an interest in making a movie go, I think I'll make a movie, I've got a phone.
Well, that happens all the time, and of course that's why there's lots of really bad movies.
Right.
Bad, low-budget independent movies that will never see the light of day. But every once in a while, there's a good one. So.
Right, but my point being is that the people who study and love and appreciate film develop a sense, the potential for a greater sensibility for making movies because they've like yourself, they've loved them since they were little.
Yes, and I'll tell you the good news too for people is that, you know, when I was young, if I liked a movie, you know, I'd say, all right, well, God, this movie was great. You'd have to be a detective to figure out who did it and what other movies that director has made. You know what I mean? And if you wanted to see that other director's films, you had to hope they came on television one day, or, you know, there were a few revival theaters that you could call in requests. I mean, eventually, you know, there was VHS that came about, you know what I mean? But now, if you like a movie by a filmmaker, you know, Taxi Driver, okay, Martin Scorsese, wow, that movie was great, you know? It is so easy to look up immediately who he is, what he's done, and watch every movie he's ever made. And you can do that with every filmmaker. It's magical, the amount of information there is out there for you if you want to soak up knowledge of film. And I bring that back to Giuseppe. You know, Giuseppe, just every Fassbender film, every Pasolini film, every Herzog film. I mean, he just soaked them all in and knows everything there is to know about these films and these filmmakers. And, you know, and it's the most fun homework you can do if you like movies. You just watch another movie tonight, you know.
True. Any question before we go? Yes. No, we got a couple now.
In terms of making a documentary, what kind of challenges did you face that you didn't really foresee just going into it, not having made a documentary before?
Well, the only challenge that I had with Giuseppe Makes a Movie, I got really lucky in that I had a really interesting subject and that we got really great footage. So that part was easy. The challenge was finding the time to do it because we had zero money to do it with. So I shot it, and then it took years for it to get finally cut together. I mean, years. I mean, I shot it in 2005, and now it's 2015. So it was a 10-year, project. But for most of those years, the footage just sat in a box in my closet. And then the producer, Mike Plant, came on board, and he was also a Giuseppe fan. He said, well, why don't you let me see if I can play with the footage? So then he took years with the footage because he had other jobs that he needed to pay the bills with. So then it sat in his closet for years. But eventually, little by little, he got all the footage digitized. And it was about a year and a half ago that he got a grant for a couple $1,000s from a group called Rooftop Films. And with that couple $1,000s, he took the footage that he had culled down to about 12 hours worth, and he gave the money to an editor. And the editor, who's a friend of his, cut together a rough cut of the movie, and suddenly we realized, hey, this movie looks pretty good. It's working. So that's when we actually all rolled up our sleeves and finished it. But the challenge was there's no money to make it with, so finding the time to finish it, that was the big challenge on that movie.
And you had a question? And we've got about 5 or 6, 7.
No problem.
How profitable were in R&B movies, and what made you make them or act in them? Like, so I watched on Chillerama, you know, at the Vaudeville. Wadzilla, yeah. I don't know. I mean, how was it, like, on the set on like making that? Was it, you know, you had to keep a serious face, but that was just like over the top kind of thing? And was it something that was? I mean, what kind of point were you getting across, like with that script when you wrote that, as far as that the attack of the gigantic sperm?
Oh, we were just trying to be funny and outrageous. You know, Showrama, for those who don't know, is an anthology film where me and 3 other directors each made a short film, and they were all tied together with scenes at a drive-in that was closing down. So the owner of the drive-in would show old movies at the drive-in, this 24-hour marathon of films at the drive-in. And so each director made like a 20-minute movie. And it's like, I don't know if you ever saw Creep Show or movies like that where
Or
you know,
drive-in.
the film, what's that?
With a drive-in, when they're driving.
Creep
was
Show
it
was
Corbin?
comic books. That was the connecting link. But then, you know, they don't make. I guess there's like ABCs of Death and VHS. Those are current anthology films as well right now. But it was just a sort of a framework. The drive-in was a framework so that each one of us 4 directors could showcase a short comedic film that was a sort of a love letter to a different era of B movie. And so mine was a 1950s style giant monster movie called Godzilla about a giant sperm. And I just wanted it to be fun and funny, that's all. And outrageous. You know, we were just trying to be outrageous.
Yeah, because I don't know how long you had to stay, whatever you used with that stuff at the end, and everyone was covered in it. That was just, I don't know how you can, you know, I never saw anything like that.
It was part of, it's all part of the fun. You know, it's just like playing in the mud.
He was affected by it, in other words. That's I remember. All right, so I guess what we'll do, I would like to offer you the opportunity to close with any thought that you want to add or anything that we haven't talked about today or other times that so that you have the final word.
No problem. I would say, just to reiterate a few things. I would say if you want to pursue a career in movies and you love movies, watch movies. Just watch more movies. You know, you can learn, the most there is to learn about movies by watching lots of movies. Watch movies that you haven't heard of. There's so many movies by so many great filmmakers that you haven't heard of. Just, you know, decide to see, you know, Hulu has all the, you know, a lot of, I should say, I don't think they have all of them, but they have most of the Criterion collection, you know what I mean? Go through the list, watch the movies you haven't heard of before. Look on the list of, you know, great, like who are some of the directors that you admire, and then look at who are some of the directors they admire. And then start watching some of the movies of the filmmakers that they love, you know? You'll just get a really great, well-rounded sense of film that way. Also, too, again, just to reiterate, if you're going to pursue filmmaking, don't take rejection personally. Just know that that's part of the job. That's as much a part of the job as the fun parts. And then also just know that if you really want to make movies, these days you can just start making movies, but, you know, don't run off half-cocked and just grab your cell phone and just go running outside filming and expect it to be great. I mean, write a good script. Gather a great cast. Make it a really good movie, even though you're making it for $10. And if you make a really good movie for $10, A, you've now made a great movie, congratulations. And B, making a movie for $10 is a story, and that might help your movie get attention. And C, if it's a great movie and you've got a great story behind it because you only made it for $10, it just might get it into a cool film festival, and that might get you some more attention. By the way, let's say you have a great idea for a short or a series of short that you want to do. Just make good product. Just have fun doing it. Just make movies because you love making movies. And one of those short films may go viral, and suddenly everybody in Hollywood is calling you. That happens all the time. Or you're doing it just because you love doing it, and your friends think it's funny. That's fine too. But it's just all part of the process. You know, if you want to make shorts, you want to make features, you want to write. If you want to write. You know what I mean? And if you want to write, don't start, 20 scripts and never finish them because you haven't plotted them out. If you're going to write a script, you have to sit down and take it seriously like it's your job. When a writer who is a professional writer writes a script, he doesn't just do it because the wind has shifted and now he feels the inspiration. It's his job, or her job. You sit down, you plot it. Sometimes it takes weeks of just plotting. Plotting it is writing, by the way. Plotting is as much writing as writing. Plot it out. Make it a great plot. As you're writing it, it's going to change. You know, you're gonna have to replot as you go. Suddenly a new idea hits you. You have to replot. Anyway, it may take you 6 months to write a script. If somebody gives you constructive criticism on it, listen to it. You know, maybe their ideas are good, maybe their ideas are bad. But a lot of people that write a script, they don't want to hear anything other than great job. But if you want it to be a good script, you should want people to give you criticism. If 10 people read the script and 10 people have different ideas of what would make it better, that's actually a good sign, because now it's in the realm of people's personal taste. If 10 people read your script and 10 people give you the same note, the ending doesn't work. Maybe the ending doesn't work, you know? So there's something to pay attention to there. Anyway, I think you just gotta love doing it just because you love doing it. And if you do, I'm not gonna say it's a guarantee that you'll succeed, because you gotta work really hard at it, but at least it's fun while you're working hard.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Adam, you've been fabulous, as you have always been. I want to point out the fact that we've done a number of shows. We've done a number of separate shows with you. We didn't do the one with Penn. You know, when you said that, I went, oh, God, whatever happened? That fell through the cracks.
Well, you know, we'll do it when the movie's done.
There you go. All right, cool. So, but we did one with Brad, and so I point that out, that people can always find other conversations that you and I have had on Rex Sikes Movie Beat and here on YouTube as well on the channel. So thank you kindly for being here and for sharing at that early hour in LA and sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us, because we really do appreciate it. I've learned, I'm sure the students learned, and as will current and future viewers on YouTube.
Thank you very much, and thank all you guys. Great questions.
All right, thanks. I'll call you from the car in a little while, and have a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye.
Yes. Awesome.